It isn't often that we see a 7-foot freshman play such an integral role in the success of a Final Four team, but that's exactly what Khaman Maluach did this season, and considering his life journey and a basketball one that began just about 5 years ago, he's made some amazing progress to this point. Listed at 7'2" with a 7'5" wingspan and a previously reported 9'8" standing reach, Maluach is going to enter the league as one of the most physically imposing, and that frame is the catalyst in what makes him the class's premier lob threat and a potential defensive anchor, a role that he filled very well for Duke, putting up about 9 and 7 in 20 minutes a game and being a net positive on the floor. Now, even with the progress he's made, there is a definite need for patience with him in many areas, and there are questions in how high you take someone who did as little as a playmaker as he did this year, but the importance of having what he brings and being a good NBA team will keep him highly regarded. Now, Maluach is the most compelling play finisher at the 5 spot in the draft. He's not the most explosive leaper, but at his size and reach, he's got a very good catch radius and was super impactful in a lot of situations. He had the 7th most dunks in a season by a freshman since 2008. He finished just under 80% at the rim overall and finished nearly 90% of his attempts as a roll man, which are all excellent marks. He certainly benefited from having threats like Flagg, Knipple, and Proctor out there, but he was a presence playing in the dunker, providing an easy target for points off a committed defense, and most prominently, his screening in the pick and roll was huge. He consistently made contact and opened up lanes for their playmakers and added value to their offense in a way that probably wasn't recognized enough. And I think when you're looking 3, 4, 5 years down the line, he should only continue to add to his timing, his craft on things like Varejão's and Gortats as he gains experience. We've kind of become accustomed to these rangy young bigs being underweight, but that isn't the case for Khaman, and when he makes contact, defenders feel it in a significant way. So from the lob target at the bucket, the solid footwork as a dive man in traffic, and a somewhat dormant ability to run the floor well for his size given the pace that they played at, he has very intriguing tools for a play finishing big.
The nipple and the slam by Maluach. The lob to Maluach in the half.
3.5 to go in the first half. James, lob, Maluach, 12-3, Duke run, and now Proctor.
Like Jalen Withers, for North Carolina, lighten up as a Charlotte guy. One triple after another. Maluach with the
second half. Knipple, 11 first half points, and he sets up.
Get back and control the game. They kind of lost it.
Here's Proctor. Keeps on dribbling.
Going to dribble in one spot. You're not going to find any openings against this Duke defense because their help side is so good. Knipple to Maluach.
Taking on Davis chest to chest. Gillis and looking for the slam.
Which John Shire said, we're good. We can live with that. Those are eventually going to go.
Yeah, 0 for 8 3, but he was happy with the end looks.
That's a monster. But Cooper Flagg's made so many plays right in.
His first rebound of the night. James ahead from Maluach. Catch, lay out a shot off, but couldn't finish.
Great rotation by Duke. He got him wide open down low from Maluach.
And Maluach mid-range. Here's Knipple. George lost it. Knipple scoops. Maluach slams it down.
6% from the floor. Unthinkable. Right, yes. So I don't know if the paint was falling off the wall in the locker room, but that works.
Now, there has been a lot of talk about his rebounding, especially after that Final Four matchup against Houston, and we'll get into all of that and more, but he was an inarguable consistent threat on the offensive glass. His effort here and ability to at least get in the mix to come up with a tap out, if not a full-on putback or an extra possession, was apparent on any given play, and it showed up in the numbers too. He ended up top 10 in offensive rebound percentage in the country this year and in the top 15 among freshmen since 2008. Now, there's still some times where he's got to know when to not reach over someone's back. He can lower the ball a little too soon sometimes, and he's not like a crazy second jump guy here either. But again, the production and effort was there in a significant way, and I think he'll have a good chance at applying it in some fashion in the NBA.
Again, operating inside, and Benny with the block. Flagg from 3. Yes.
Now on the defensive end, Maluach's ability to take up space and deter opponents from good looks as a true 5 was prominent, and when paired with a prolific help man like Cooper Flagg, you get one of the best freshman front lines we'll ever see in this area. But individually, he played a big part in making them exceptional and having teams shoot significantly worse both at the rim and in the paint while he was on the floor, and overall anchoring one of the best defenses in the country. He didn't post the most impressive shot blocking numbers, in fact they were on the lower end, but his ability to take up space, be in the area, and make players think twice about even trying him at the rim is where his presence is felt most. He can get vertical. The fouls never got to a real point of concern, particularly in this area, and even though he does like to volleyball spike it at times and can use some refining on when actually to go for a block, he didn't negate the positives through some of that. So the tools are there, the numbers back up what he showed on the court in terms of impact at the rim, and if he can continue to grow as much as he has in the last couple years in positioning and instincts, it could be an even bigger part of who he is.
Here it could be blowout, and it happens in every Duke game, right? There's going to be a point where it's fitted great.
Nice roll. Oh, look at that. Musaf deep in the corner, trying to get around the hip of Knippel and block it.
Thea, Johnson, Kidd, and Maluach.
Again next year with Cameron and Caden Boozer. And he has a unique coaching.
Andre with the right hand, rejected Maluach.
The ankle breaker there, but you got to finish it, right? So 21 against Virginia. Most of those in the paint.
Now there's also a lot to be intrigued by in his pick and roll defense. He'll naturally be a drop big and someone that's best used through taking advantage of his size and ability to eat up space in the paint. And he has several games and moments where he just completely take away options as that funnel man and was solid on the retreat or backpedal to take away those opportunities too. And in general, it's hard to overstate just how much better his positioning has gotten from where he was pre-Duke. But the part that was really intriguing long term was just how much they trusted him to play basically every coverage, including switching, playing to the level, hard hedging, and even a couple traps or blitzes, and that's just not something you see very often for someone his size, let alone actually have success doing it. Now he's not in that NBA upper echelon tier as a mover to the point that he's truly switchable, and I think it's important to make the distinction given the standards for that in the league. He'll also still need to figure out how close he can get to guards to affect them on the perimeter, but his ability to contain and recover in most situations was impressive. And lastly, the fact that he has such minimal mistakes in executing an ever-evolving game plan was exceptional. There's still absolutely going to be a learning curve in the NBA, but I expected things to be a whole lot bumpier, especially with the volume of scheme switch-ups they had, but that wasn't the case at all, and I think it bodes well for his long-term success.
Incredible. A little ISO on the elbow. Love was really good against Mississippi State.
They're bigger in every spot on the floor. They're going to see a lot of that when they play Illinois. Illinois loves that.
On the receiving end, he goes into double figures.
And that one came from the side pick and roll that time, Brian. Normally, we would see it from the middle.
Here is Maluach. Working into the lane, fall away on Maluach.
Love sitting on 33. Was deflected.
The game one, then fouled the three-point shooter. Elliot Cadeau gave him a 4-point play.
And lost by one in Raleigh on Wednesday night.
Ndongo on the drive, and a block from behind by Maluach. Going to get a second effort, Powell on the baseline.
In Houston, arguably the best resume, the best wins of anybody in the country.
Now one of the more important parts of his game to talk about is his output as an overall playmaker and what long-term upside might still be there. He was super limited in his role this year. He wasn't involved hardly at all besides screening and finishing plays, and he had an alarmingly low assist and usage percentage. And that of course begs the question of how much of that was because he's incapable and how much of that was him being put in a simplified role on a team that was contending for the national title. Now we'll start with the thing that might concern me most in his entire game, and that is the lack of passing. We just haven't seen much in terms of processing on short rolls, running delay and dribble handoffs outside of a few select games, and he didn't put the ball on the floor much either. So knowing how vital that is right now and how teams might even scheme for that to happen through being aggressive on ball screens until he shows that he can beat them, it is a concern, and it's something that traditionally you want to see more out of a big you're considering in the top half of the lottery.
Maluach just right over the top of Mutombo. And then nobody guarded. Shot clock at 2. Maluach with the rebound. Another offensive board for Duke. They're dominating there, Evans.
Get his feet together to get it up. Here goes Proctor. And he leaves it up for Maluach. Sends it out the flag.
Now, in terms of overall offense and scoring, he was capable of doing quite a bit more in previous settings, albeit against some questionable competition and varying results. But you'd see a fadeaway, you'd see a move or two in the low post that show good touch with either hand, and he might even drive or face up on occasion too. So while I wouldn't draft him banking on this being a huge part of his game, there's at least more there than some others in a similar archetype showed in recent drafts. And adding to that, even though he made just 4 threes on the season, he is our annual big who has some long-term shooting upside. Now, he does have some positives working in his favor. He actually shot a decent volume of them in the BAL and NBA Academy. He's a 75% free throw shooter, and his mechanics have progressed in a noticeable way. He will need to continue getting a lot more comfortable here before he's a legitimate NBA threat, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities, and if he does shoot it, now we're looking at a unique player and one whose value is almost inarguable.
This year against Maine and Army.
Wow. Part of this run for the Blue Devils, they're going to need him as this season goes along.
They won the battle with the free throw line. Where they kind of got.
Well, and that's one of the areas of concern. We've already seen it with Georgia Tech when they attack the basket.
Now, as we alluded to earlier, there has been a lot made about his ability to rebound and finish possessions, and I would agree and say he does need to do a better job on the defensive glass to an extent, but to me it has more to do with his ability to maintain positioning and fight through physicality on box-offs than it is just his hands being bad, though for whatever reason those issues showed up more on the defensive glass than anywhere else. If we want to look at this statistically using rebound percentage, he is still on the lower end, but at least in the ballpark of several recent guys taken in the lottery on the defensive end, and again, much better than most on the offensive end. So he can definitely do a much better job here, and some of this will be connected to his development physically, but it's not quite the long-term red flag I thought it could be.
Reno wants a long one. Fouls. Catch and shoot. So 16 seasons with this kind of a game in the ACC tournament.
Now, another area that stuck out was his post defense. The numbers didn't completely match up with what I saw, but there was quite a few times where a big who either had quick feet or a certain level of craft took advantage of him in a memorable way on the block, especially in those one-on-one situations. I think his positioning and understanding of leverage needs to get better, especially because he's almost 10 feet tall when he sticks his arm in the air, and he could get a bit jumpy and into foul trouble in these situations, though it did improve over time. So again, at his size, he did have positive moments and has a ceiling here that's worth having confidence in, but it is something that needs a little work.
Williams banging with Maluach, and Maluach going to piece
the 7-footer. On the back down, banging, and a travel.
Knipple trying not to give Brea any room at all. Williams banging with Maluach.
Dongo into Maluach. Dongo puts his head down.
Now, the last thing that we'll talk about is mostly physical related. He only played about 21 minutes a game, which actually isn't that far off from where Donovan Clingan was last year, who at draft time was about 18 months older than Maluach will be, but that's still a question mark for him as he heads into an 82 game season. And then I'd say, while I think he moves exceptionally well for anyone that's 7'2" and was born in 2006, he's still susceptible to blow-bys, isn't a true switch big, and probably isn't as versatile as a leaper as I would like on both ends. So if we're looking long term, some of those things can and will get better, and the way that he's rapidly added to his frame makes me confident he still just needs a little time to get used to his body, but some of this could impact how effective he is in the league. Khaman Maluach's projection is fairly simple to me. He's a pure 5 who will finish plays offensively, has some upside to grow from there long term in the shooting and post play, and then will serve as a rim protector and drop big first with more scheme versatility than most others his size. Obviously, the growth and skill set is going to dictate a lot for him, but I think the real impact swing is just in honing in where it counts as a big, particularly on defense. But if he can put it together, I see that top 70 impact range as a pretty attainable higher end outcome. And floor wise, it's become more difficult in this era to not have an 8-year career as a rim running big as long as you're healthy. But aiming somewhere in that 30% outcome range, I could see lower end backup 5 for sure. He could go as high as the top 5 in the right situation, and he'll likely be in a tier that's in that range for me, but top 10 is far more realistic. The most obvious fits in the lottery are first Toronto and Chicago, and then after that it gets kind of weird because a lot of lottery teams actually have a center worth investing in. But Houston or New Orleans would be interesting. Brooklyn can do pretty much whatever, and then I'd also throw a wild card out there like Orlando, because if he starts falling, he might be worth throwing an asset out there to get. Comparison-wise, there are some similarities between he and Mark Williams, and they're about as close as you're going to get in terms of a physical comparison, so I'd say that's a decent reference. Not quite as prolific a shot blocker as Mitchell Robinson, but there are some similarities there. And then there's a world where the offensive skill set grows enough to the point where it looks more like Brook Lopez, or at least something like that. That's just the best example that we kind of have for who he is on both ends, but it'll take a little time before we get there. Khaman Maluach's size and tools as a rim protector and play finisher give him a pretty clear path to NBA contribution, and given the trajectory he's been on, learning the game just a few years ago and evolving in multiple ways, that makes for a prospect that's fairly easy to buy into. Now, patience is going to be very important with him, especially because he too is another guy who is young enough to be a senior in high school right now, but at a certain point, his traits and ability to fill a necessary NBA role is worth taking high.